Hello.
Now, Graham, I suppose last week we were just getting to discussing parts of Mission Impossible: The Reckoning, or is it called Reckoning Part One?
No, it's Dead Reckoning Part One.
That's the whole point. Dead, isn't it? Dead Reckoning
Yeah,
Part One.
yeah, yeah,
So, in other
yeah.
words, there could be who knows how many parts there could be, and it seemed to be a lot of hard work in a film to actually not have a resolution.
No, it's a brilliant piece of action filmmaking,
It is. It
and the
is.
characterizations are all very good, and the casting's all very good. But it was the first Mission Impossible I've watched where, even though the stunts and the action set pieces were brilliant, it was like when you watch a not great Bond film because some Bonds are better than others.
Mm.
It's like you start to become self-conscious that you're watching a Bond film. You sit there and you're thinking like, I'm watching a Mission Impossible film, and it hasn't really happened before. And the other thought I had about the new Mission Impossible was that it's all very well having an interesting premise for the film, which in this case is AI and the dangers of AI. But the Mission Impossible films and the Bond films work on getting caught up in the thrills of the action and in the intrigues of the showdowns. And any idea in the film that makes you think outside that detracts from its position, which is basically a spy thriller. And by having a thought provoking theme of AI, you found your thoughts drifting off to, yeah, what if AI did happen like it could happen in the world? Well, you don't want that in the middle of a spy thriller. You want to be concentrating on the film. So I think you actually picked a topic which was actually too interesting.
Could that topic be resolved in Dead Reckoning Part Two more
Well, I don't.
coherently?
I can't, it wasn't a lack of coherence. It was a coherent film. It was just that the central concept was too thought provoking for the film. And having done about 7 or 8 Mission Impossibles, it is now become
Mm.
visibly a formula. Now I knew it always was a formula, but you weren't always so aware that it was a formula. And I sat there thinking, like, this is just another good Mission Impossible film. Like when you watch, I mean, when you saw Daniel Craig in Bond in Casino Royale, you forgot it was a formula again. When you saw him in Skyfall, you forgot it was a formula. But when you watched him in Spectre, you were well aware it was a formula
Was a formula.
because the story just wasn't good enough, and the concept wasn't good enough, and the set pieces just weren't quite exciting enough. So this Mission Impossible, although it's still a great film, I don't think it's quite up there with previous ones.
I mean, it took Matrix rather. It was rather quicker to become formulaic, wasn't it? The Matrix by part three, I guess. This has been a long run
Yeah,
with
well,
Mission Impossible. I mean, obviously, the Fast and Furious movies are still going. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say strong. They're certainly going loud and flash at number 10. Although they've now cut the title to sense even faster, just fast 10.
yeah, but they're not comparable. 'Cause Mission Impossible's always been quite an intelligent movie, even though it's essentially an action film. It's always been intelligent and sophisticated and very rarely vulgar. I don't think you can put that in the same ballgame as
Vulgar.
Fast
That's a
and
good word.
Furious. Yeah,
You're going to say that
Mission
to Vin
Impossible.
Diesel's face.
Well, if I ever met him, which is unlikely, yeah, I would, yeah. But no, it's not vulgar at any point. It's Mission Impossible.
So, um, what? I mean, is there any point making Dead Reckoning Part Two?
Well, how well until you see it, you don't know. For all I know, part two might have a bit more zing, and as you say, the concept may be resolved in a highly satisfactory, interesting fashion. So,
Mm.
since it's been very good up to now, and it still is good, it's just that you can only reinvent the wheel so many times.
What,
Who's to say? I'm definitely going to prepare to give it a chance.
just elaborate on the AI side of it, because maybe I'm simplistic as I'm watching the film. Um, I was rather more just drawn into the thrills and into. I've never been Tom's number one fan, but I do think that within this role, undeniably watchable as ever within this. Albeit he did seem to play within a certain concentrated style within the piece. But how do you think the AI element plays out in the piece?
Well, it basically is used as a MacGuffin, like in a Hitchcock film where
Yes.
the premise of the film is just an excuse for the rest of the story. I mean, no one who watches North by Northwest with Cary Grant and Eve Marie really cares about what the point of the film is. It's just such
No.
a brilliantly made film with great characters, dialogue, action. So the premise is there to make it even harder for Tom Cruise's team to succeed against
Yes.
overwhelming odds, which of
Yes.
course it does, because if the bad guys have access to an AI program which can analyze all information across the entire world, personal and other information, so it's always one step ahead. It always knows what you're going to do next. And on top of that, it's got complete control of the digital world, which means it can intercept live feeds of audio and visuals and make it so the Mission Impossible team don't know what's real and what's not real. Obviously, it should make it more exciting because it makes Tom Cruise's task of being the hero even tougher. But because it's an interesting idea, I just found myself drifting off into the thoughts about what AI means rather than actually concentrating on the set pieces and the action. So I think he actually, for the once in the whole series, he's thought of a concept which is too big for the film.
Therefore, it becomes a Mission Impossible in its own way.
Possibly, but as failures go, it's still a pretty bloody good failure.
I mean, I hugely enjoyed it. And interestingly, we had plenty of press coverage at the time of the filming was taking place on the, I think, on the North York Moors Railway, and
That's true.
but although it's quite hard to actually quite work out what, if you see what I mean, because actually what they use in the background is not the scenery of glorious North Yorkshire moors or whatever. It is instead the Alps, but the actual scenes on and in various trains that's what was filmed here in North Yorkshire, as I understand it.
Well, that's another thing about the film. I could see the join. Some parts of that sequence, which is a long sequence with the train journey, look like the Alps, but other bits, because we are northern, although it doesn't always sound like it, because we are northern, we recognise those hills as types of hills that are definitely not in the bloody Alps. Maybe people from somewhere else wouldn't realise that, but anyway, I just thought, wait a minute, that's not the Alps, that's definitely North Yorkshire. And the bit where he paraglides at the end, that's the Lake District. You can tell
I agree. I fair point, Graham. I agree. Now, just while we're on films, the big talking point, obviously, this weekend, and I think we're going to save Oppenheimer till we've both seen it. But just a little bit of background about this weekend. Two films opened, as we know, Barbie and Oppenheimer, and people were choosing to go to both films to have their Barbieheimer experience or their Heimer Barbie experience. And I guess
that sounds
actually
torturous.
one of the decisions that had to be made is: do you want to see well, to call it lighter would be maybe insulting to Greta Gerwig's intelligence as to what point she's making about feminism, or do you want to go to the really, really heavyweight piece first and the much longer one? And I think that's a toss up as to how you like to if you're going to watch two films in a day. I wouldn't be advising watching two films in a day anyway on these occasions. I think make the most of them separately. What was interesting, just on statistics here, Graham, on Saturday I went to view one of 28 screenings of Barbie. 28.
What?
And 25 of them sold out.
Holy crap.
Now, we talked about whether Mission Impossible is Tom's second year running of saving the film industry, but figures like that are extraordinary for the first weekend of Barbie. Now, Oppenheimer, longer film, so maybe can't necessarily make a fair comparison about the number of screenings, but how many screenings do you think there were of Oppenheimer on Saturday?
I would say 3.
So there were 5. Now, it's a 3-hour film, which maybe obviously that restricts the number, but equally they've got so many screens there that doesn't necessarily restrict it. And out of those 5, 3 were sold out. So not that dissimilar in a scale of sellouts. But
that's quite encouraging for a 3-hour film about the man who invented the atom bomb.
Absolutely, it's not a decision that blows up in the face at all. So that absolutely. Now, Barbie, however, it seems to me to be. I mean, it was interesting to see there were really young audiences. There were older audiences. There were men, women, teenagers. It seemed to me to tap into the whole market. So from Greta Gerwig's point of view, that is a triumph as a starting point. And it's a film that, look, it's we've seen with Little Women the way that she re-looked at that. If it's fair to say that if there's a consistent theme in her work, it
Yep.
is the feminism. It is the role
Yeah,
of
but
women.
she's not really looking at anything. There has been no previous Barbie films. Barbie isn't a film character. Barbie has no film history. Barbie is a friggin' mass-produced doll.
So, right now, from that point of view, Graham, you could be dismissing it just as a doll. I think that is to forget the impact of that doll on culture, and it's been vast. It's the best known doll of all.
Yeah, but being best known doesn't mean you have any real impact in any
It
real
has had
significant whatsoever.
impact on young life
Action
after
Man was
young
very,
life
very popular,
after
but I
young
don't believe
life.
Action Man influenced Western culture.
I think Barbie most definitely has an influence. The way the Barbie look, we all know what it means. We probably all know what the Action Man look means as well. Men are probably more derogatory about that, but the point that the film is partly making, the starting point of the film is Helen Mirren doing a voiceover about the perfect Barbie world with the dream houses. The Kens don't even seem to have houses, but very soon Gerwig is undermining that, and the consequences. And this is told through the teenage, the grouchy, cool teenager in the piece who says, "Look, you know, Barbie." This is speaking to stereotypical Barbie, played by Margot Robbie, who through this porthole created by a weird Barbie has gone into the real world, and she's absolutely buttoned by the teenager about you've put feminism back 50 years. And that, so you can say that, you know, she's just a doll, but I think the whole point is, and I don't even think it's a contentious point, this idea of the ideal to look like Barbie, which is the ideal that's being put forward from a very young age. It's fair to say that if you're going to take a feminist position on it, as Greta Gerwig does, then it's not a healthy position
So how does the film end without giving the whole, you know,
so she
plot
has a
spoiler
decision.
away?
Ultimately, she has a decision to make, and I will not say what decision the
So
stereotypical
does
Barbie
fine,
makes.
fine, fine. So does the decision end up with the forces of good, which ironically in a film about Barbie should be undermining Barbie? Does it end up making the right decision?
What it does is it gives Barbie the opportunity and the right to be whoever Barbie wants. And
Oh, that's a cop out.
you think that's a cop out?
Oh, completely. Either Barbie's right or Barbie's wrong. Either the film is siding with Barbie or it's having its cake and eating it too, and then sitting on the fence, which to me sounds like it's doing the latter because that's the most prevalent attitude in the Western world right now, which is to not recognize or rather not to challenge when something's bad because the thing that's bad is actually very popular or has some powerful backers. So why challenge it when you can sit on the fence? That's the general attitude.
The most important speech in the film is not given by Margot Robbie's character. It's given by a character from the real world, the mother of the teenager, who has a long monologue about the frustrations of women in the real world as opposed to in the Barbie world. And it isn't about not matching up to the ideals of as presented by these perfect Barbie figures. It is actually about the realities of life for women, and that is Greta Gerwig's greater point within the piece.
Oh yeah,
I take
I
your
like
point,
the
Graham,
fact.
about the cop out. I
I like
think
the fact that it does that. I like the fact it addresses the issue.
yeah,
That's all good. The difference between now and the past, particularly the late 1960s, which are an awful lot about, or early 70s, is
yes,
if this film had taken the same approach in the late 1960s, at the end of the film, they would have blown up Barbie World. Because in Zabriskie Point, the famous 1969 film by Antonioni,
mm,
which is stars Rod Taylor,
mm,
which is about left-wing students in LA and a young woman who's the daughter of like a tycoon and how she's on the side of the students really and blah blah blah. And it's all like, good guys, bad guys, reality, you know, individuals with their own individual interests. It ends up with materialism being blown up. You know,
um,
in Western culture, used to know who the enemy was, and then say, okay, that's the enemy. We want to get rid of this. And now we seem to bring problems to the surface. We seem to raise relevant issues in culture, and
yeah.
then we seem to cop out by going, well, everybody's got their individual right to see it the way they want. Well, tell
It,
that to the Nazis when they
yeah.
tried to run the show.
I mean,
The idea that individuals trump everything is part of the problem.
But it is a film that champions the right to be individual. It's also a film that champions the empowerment of women. The Ken, of course, famously, Ken never had the crucial part of the male anatomy.
Yeah,
So
it's not
he's always
addressed in
been
the film.
Ken has always been emasculated anyway. But in this, he
Yeah.
basically is told, "Stop your patriarchy with your world of your horses and you, so." There now, are you suggesting this is in some way naive, even in the age of Me Too? You're saying that this doesn't go far enough?
It's not naive. It's just that the prevalent Western liberal belief is that individual rights trump communal rights. Therefore, if someone wants to behave in a certain way and dress in a certain way and think in a certain way, it doesn't matter what it is, that's fine. But that means that every time there's an issue in society which is a common issue, which affects lots of people, which is the same issue for lots of people, it only takes one person to say, well, I don't see why I should have to go along with that because I'm an individual. And then the whole argument to try and get things changed gets undermined.
Is it not dangerous to stamp down on individuality? I mean, I think that's one of the things that used to so
No,
frustrate me in
democracy
school
isn't about
days
individual. Yeah,
was
yeah.
you know how things like wearing school uniform, which there's perhaps the argument about it, suppress individuality. But I love the fact that schools let you play on a stage and be someone, and at the same time appreciating the need for teamwork as well. But within that, finding your individuality, finding out who you are. You surely all have a right to that. That's one of the points again the film makes. You can't all just be Barbie. If everyone's just a variation of Barbie and a variation of Ken, do you think individuality is genuinely dangerous, Graham?
No, democracy is demos, the people. The
Right.
people, by definition, are more than one person. So democracy is founded not on individual rights; it's founded on communal rights. But of course, if communal rights means that it's run by one leader
Mm.
who then enforces one way of life on everybody as in a
Yeah.
communal sense, well,
As
that
a,
doesn't
and
work
in the
either.
communist
So,
sense, Graham, and in the communist
democracy,
sense.
democracy is always a to and fro between the individual and the masses. And what's happened since the Thatcher and Reagan got in power in the 80s and since the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall
Mm.
is that the Western world, which had that to and fro between majority and individual minorities, that's been overwhelmed by internecine fighting caused by the idea that every individual can do whatever they want, whenever they want, the way they want to. And the whole communal side has been downgraded. And that's reflected in Hollywood and in modern movies, which very rarely take a strong line on anything.
So it's an interesting dilemma, this, isn't it? Because I do understand for the maximum benefit for all, that does probably come to some cost for individuality within that. But we are drawn
Exactly.
to individuals. We're not drawn to the bass player. We're not drawn to the drummer. We're drawn to the lead singer.
Yeah, but you can't have individuality unless you've got something to be individual against. It's a to and fro situation. If you had like 60 million individuals in Britain who all were completely different, all did different jobs, all wore different clothes, all thought different things, all ate different food, there would be no society. But that's not true anyway. What you've got now is a different version of the masses where there's more individual strands and there's more individual rights. But at the same time, to a large degree, people are still very similar. So, but people now don't even realize that they are also similar. People now are obsessed with the idea of being different, but they're not different. They're all still basically doing the same things. And no one wants to acknowledge it anymore. Everybody wants to pretend that everybody can be themselves the whole time without even knowing what themselves actually means.
Has that led
It makes
to
filmmaking complicated because if you're going to reflect,
yeah.
if you're going to make films that just reflect the way society is right now, you're going to get films that are a conceptual mess, which of course is what
So
you're actually getting.
which is more important in the film, the hero or the anti-hero?
It's that old cliche, you can't have one with the other. You need a good baddie to make a good goodie. If
You
the
do,
baddie's
which of course is absolutely in the Bond movie. Yeah,
exactly. You're right, Charles.
I mean, I think this is a really fascinating one, isn't it? Because I think the perfect ideal is collective good, but that allows individuals to flourish within that. That's the ideal. So you still
Well, it
have a
is that.
sense of collective responsibility, social togetherness, but
Mm,
with I don't like suppression of individuality in education, for example. This idea from Sunak that we should be pushing maths and not effectively pushing the humanities subjects, which by dint of being about intellect and individual thinking, he seems to think is more damaging and less likely to produce an economic benefit to the country. Which is not actually, I don't think that's what you're saying at all about, the dangers of individuality. But I do think that's what he's looking at as the threat of individuality is to go against somehow suppressing things to prevent a government staying in charge and having a system that only permeates wealth for those who already are wealthy.
that's a very good speech. You should have been at the by-elections last week.
Well, there we go, Graham. So that's that's Barbie and the world
So
at
was it
large.
good, Charles? Was Barbie any good? Was it a good film or not?
Look, I enjoyed it a whole lot more than I thought. I didn't quite know what to expect beyond the fact that I do think Greta Gerwig's work is really interesting. I enjoyed it very much, and just to say, I hugely enjoyed Ryan Gosling's performance as the uh, vacuous stowaway Ken, who would make
He
any
does do
man feel
plastic very
inadequate
well,
when
though,
it comes
doesn't he?
to the state of his body, and Margot Robbie, who again is emphasising
She's
what
always good,
I mean, it's a tremendous performance from her again,
and she's a proper
I
actress.
think it's
She's
well
good
worth.
at
I
every
do think
film.
it's well worth seeing. I don't think it's candy coloured. Of course it is. It's full of pinks. Of course it is. But actually, it says plenty about our world now. And even if you're not happy about the individuality being perhaps a little bit cliched within it, I still think that's of merit. So absolutely, I
Is
would
there
recommend seeing it.
is there
And
any merit? Is there any merit in a Hollywood tie-up for the next film? Maybe Barbie versus Action Man.
that's a whole thing. By the way, Graham, just sidetrack on this. Barbarella, was that in any way kind of playing on Barbie?
It's an interesting idea. The name might have come from that, but the
Mm.
film itself does present Jane Fonda in a sort of sexist doll fashion,
Yes,
i.e.,
exactly.
Barbie with lots of sex.
Yes,
And she's treated really badly by the men throughout the film because she's treated
yes.
entirely as a sex object. So yeah, you may be onto something there. Yeah, you're right.
Hmm. So maybe,
The good old sexist
anyway, there's a
60s.
thought. Now, Graham, so let's see. I think it's time for a little thought on a new album. An album I have just heard about 5 tracks from today. This is the new Blur album, so it's kind of passed me in a blur so far. I don't feel I can say anything other than these are quite grave and serious, gently melodic songs. None of the oikish of the era that's perhaps most prominent in people's minds about Blur. You, however, I'm assuming have seen fit to hear the whole album to make your thoughts clear on this new album, whose title is Graham.
The Ballad of Darren.
Who is Darren?
Well, he's not involved with the album. His photographs there. I think he was like an ex-road manager of Blur
Oh,
back in the
okay.
day. Well, I'm not an expert in this, but I don't see how that frankly pertains to the album very much.
No.
I've read the reviews who all tried to make they all stretch towards understanding the meaning of the album overall and how it relates to the person Darren. But I don't get it. I played the whole album twice, read the lyrics, and I think that's bit of a stretch. But if Blur choose to call it that, completely up to them.
Yeah.
But
So
This is only the second album since about 2003,
yes.
and considering the first album came out in 1990, to get excited about a new Blur album is a bit like in the 1980s if you and me got excited by a new album by I don't know Fats Waller or Billie Holiday
Yeah.
or maybe even Al Jolson. It's that it's that sort of level of time.
Well, the magazines have all seen fit to have it as the lead review, which tells you that there is interest in it, of course.
Oh yeah, I'm interested, of course, and I have to say that my conclusion after 2 listens to the album, which
Mm.
obviously makes it definitive, is that compared to the Magic Whip, which came out in 2015, this is a much better solo Damon Albarn album
Yes.
because essentially, like the Magic Whip, only 3 tracks the Magic Whip actually sounded like Blur when they were
Yes.
an
Yeah.
active force, and
Mm.
only 3 tracks on the Ballad of Darren actually sound like Blur. and the
Yeah.
rest of both albums do sound like a Damon Albarn solo album.
Mm.
And the big difference between this one and the last one is I think the quality songs on the Damon Albarn solo album is actually better. I think it's a better
Yeah.
collection of songs. It's a little bit more positive in tone. It's got better melodies than the previous album,
Mm.
and it's too early to call yet, but it might be a very good album. Whereas the Magic Whip, which I was quite pleased with at first, has emerged to be possibly the Blur's worst album. It's certainly not any better than the Think Tank, and possibly worse than Think Tank. So the question is the Ballad of Darren going to be another Magic Whip, or is it going to be a properly good album that you want to come back to in 10 years' time, like the great Blur albums in the 1990s?
Mm.
And I don't know yet, but it sounds more hopeful than the Magic Whip.
He is Damon is remarkably prolific. It was really not that long ago that I saw him doing actually solo songs in
Mm,
York Minster, and
mm,
lo and behold, back with Blur making another album. I mean, we talked just recently about whether one would call Pulp a heritage act, and very interestingly, not interesting, but that very same weekend, Blur played new songs and all at Wembley to a huge sellout audience there. Pulp did introduce a new song, by the way, the second night
oh
of
yeah,
the
what was it
run
called?
in Sheffield. They played one song that they'd never ever done before. Jarvis didn't say when it was written, but just said, we're in Sheffield. We're going to play something we've never ever performed before. So that there has been, well, a one new song from Pulp
Mm,
has emerged to be heard in Sheffield, made in Sheffield, heard in Sheffield. But I think the point
that's
we were
good.
making about that was whether what stops being the heritage act is doing new pieces. So Blur are doing that, Graham. And I suppose the most blunt question, given how actually I think Damon's other work that he's done, be it with Gorillaz, be it his solo works, whatever, is it worth Blur having made this second version of the comeback? Is it worth it?
The Magic Whip to me now sounds like a collection of Blur B-sides and average album tracks, which, because Blur are a very good band, is a not bad thing to exist, but that's what it
Mm,
is really. And the Ballad of Darren sounds like it might be higher quality, so it
mm,
might be better than that. It's too early to tell, but I think the songwriting is better. But
mm,
what I mean about it not sounding like Blur is that there's very few tracks that smack of a group dynamic. It
yeah.
doesn't sound like four guys who got in the studio, worked together, and came up with songs like it does on their albums in the 1990s. Most of the tracks, even the tracks that are very good, sound like Damon Albarn with a collection of crack musicians
Mm,
creating a well-crafted, well-produced sound. But it could
mm,
be any musicians. It doesn't sound necessarily like Blur whatsoever. Didn't the last album, doesn't in this one either,
doesn't on
apart
this
from
one.
three tracks.
Mm,
And it's a bit like if the Beatles had stayed together and recorded the next album after Abbey Road had been the John Lennon Plastic Ono Band album
mm,
with the same tracks, but rather than Klaus Ruben playing bass, it'd been Paul McCartney playing bass. Rather than Lennon and lead guitar, it'd been George Harrison lead guitar. If the actual sound of the bass and the sound of the lead guitar that replaced Klaus Ruben and John Lennon on the Beatles version of the John Lennon Plastic Ono Band had sounded exactly the same as the John Lennon version of the John Lennon Plastic Ono Band, and it was called the Beatles, would that actually be a Beatles album, or would it just sound like a John Lennon solo album? So I would argue that most of this album sounds like a Damon album solo album, and it doesn't matter a damn who's on most of the tracks. That's my only reservation about it.
How does it stand up against Alex Turner and Arctic Monkeys, where he very much
Interesting
is?
you say that.
Mm,
Because if you take away the Blur soundtrack, so take away St. Charles Square,
yeah,
which is like a lengthy track, a
yeah,
sort of avant rock sub Sonic Youth track, which is actually very good. Take away the Narcissist, a sort of
hmm,
like deceptively plodding arty rock track,
yeah,
which is actually quite a sweet track in understated fashion. Take away the Heights, which is Blur being a bit arty like they were occasionally on 13 and the
mm,
eponymous 1997 album. Take
yeah,
those away, and the rest of the album sounds most like recent Arctic Monkeys albums. The actual tone of the album doesn't sound like the Gorillaz. It sounds
no,
like the Car album and the
yeah, mm,
Tranquility Casino, blah blah
mm,
blah,
mm,
bass album. That's what it sounds like. The same sort of tone, same
mm.
sort of like instrumentation, same sort of feel. And as such, it's actually a good album. If you took away the three Blur tracks in this album and said it was by the Arctic Monkeys, you'd think, yeah, this is a good album.
Interesting thought, Graham. Now, this has been the week of the Theakston's Old Peculiar Crime Writing Festival. And I guess the image that's most struck people is the one with Nicola Sturgeon sitting with Val McDermid on a seat, presumably maybe in Valley Gardens, I think. A wonderful, wonderful picture, Charlotte Graham picture, I think it was, which has done the rounds. But of course, and I think of 2019, I think actually Nicola interviewed Val at the festival. And obviously, it does bring a bit of attention when Nicola Sturgeon comes to the festival. Obviously, fellow Scot to you, Graham. You've sort of dipped in and out of the festival. And so what's been your vibe this time for the festival?
Well, the slight problem is that I've had serious back problems. So I could only go yesterday, and that was like doped up on serious drugs. Otherwise, the pain was too much. So I've only seen bits and pieces. But the first thing is that it's a fantastic festival. I've been, obviously, it's the 20th year of what is definitely Britain's best crime writing festival, and probably the best in Europe. And I finally realised that what's so good about the Theakston's Old Peculiar Crime Writing Festival in Harrogate, which is held at the Old Swan Hotel, where Agatha Christie famously went missing in the 20s for a couple of weeks during that famous historical event. What it feels like is like when Edinburgh National Film Festival used to be brilliant. Remember the days when all the press went, and when there's a real buzz and everybody famous hung around, but you could still chat to anybody you wanted to chat to. It wasn't like egos on show and there weren't bouncers and minders, or you didn't need invitations to say hello to anybody. That's exactly the same atmosphere as the Crime Writing Festival in Harrogate. So like I was like standing in the marquee yesterday, and who walked past me like virtually touched my shoulder, but Lee Child. Well, Lee Child, his Jack Reacher series of books has sold 100 million copies worldwide, leading to that film with Tom Cruise again,
of course,
to mention him. And then Steph McGovern walked past me. Then there was Richard Osman, who wrote the Thursday Murder Club, the famous TV presenter, who is even more tall in real life than you can possibly imagine from TV. you know, as you mentioned short at the beginning, I've never felt short in my life, no matter what my height actually technically is. But he makes you feel short. And as for Val and Nicola, my God, they've had a love affair going for a long time. I don't mean like physically, but as best buddies. And I believe that Nicola is talking about writing her first novel with the possible help of Val. And I'm thinking, like, is this because she's going to have time in jail to actually write it?
No comment.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, it's a tricky situation. I mean, she may end up being charged and may not have been charged, but it's ironic she should come to a crime writing festival during this whole tricky period for her.
I had deliberately avoided any reference to that.
Well, at least there is the elephant in the marquee, isn't it?
It most certainly is the elephant in the marquee. I'm focusing on the word writing, Graham.
Well, yeah, but
only because I don't want a slander case going on here.
Well, exactly. I've got no idea what's going on in Scotland.
No, I realise that,
no
and it was a flippant comment, but I'm just qualifying it, obviously, just for the sake of safety. Now you do wonder why. It's a good question that you ask here. This is our closing question for tonight. Why crime writers are different from or to, I don't know which is the correct grammar, I never do know, from or to different, why are they different from or to normal writers of such works, so of fiction pieces? What distinguishes them, Graham, apart from, I'll tell you one difference, massively successful sales in bookshops?
Yeah, no, there was one author mentioned on stage at one of the great events yesterday at Theakston's Old Peculiar Crime Festival in Harrogate, presented by Harrogate National Festivals, who'd sold 1 million copies of a book. And I'd never heard of the writer, never heard of it. Now, do you realise that in the world of the Booker Prize, in the world of Ian McEwan and Martin Amis, if you sell 100,000 copies of a fiction novel, you're a huge hit. And this unknown person had sold 1 million copies of a crime novel. So you're right; it's a totally different world. They actually do have a mass audience. They actually do sell lots of copies, but they're not pretentious. They have no crime writers are not pretending to be writing the great American novel or the great British novel. They're not pretending to be Marcel Proust or Shakespeare.
No,
they're writing a crime novel. Hence, their egos, and they still have egos like everybody does. Their egos are considerably smaller than writers who've sold a lot less copies of a book because they know what they're doing. They know that to a great degree, crime writing is a formula. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're just
No.
trying to give it new life and put their own spin on it. So they're just a nicer bunch. They're less competitive. They like hanging around.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.